Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to Archiviews episode 1. So today we're joined by architect Badrinath Kaleru of the chief architect of Studio Ardete. He's gonna walk us through his design process, how he works, what was his life after college, how he got to where he is today, and we're gonna discuss one of his projects. And at the end, we are going to get some advice for future students out there. So prospective students, current students, what the field actually demands and how should you go about it. So welcome, sir. Welcome to the show. Okay, so before we actually start the interview, let me tell you a little bit about Studio Ardete. So here is a little information that I can give you about Studio Ardete before we begin the interview. Believing that every problem has the capacity to inspire unique and creative solutions that motivate growth, the young duo of Badrinath Kaleru and Prerna Agarwal founded Studio Ardete in the year 2010, right after they finished their college. Located in Chandigarh, India, the team at Studio Ardete began with these two and now has over 25 members. Their vision, as they put it, is to design spaces that would evolve into art, enriching the lives of people inhabiting them. Not hesitating to take on even the most challenging of projects, they use modern construction and building methods to come up with designs that are truly inspiring. With a passion for creating something distinctive and taste for experimentation, Studio Ardete has completed various projects in India and abroad. Having designed in parts of Asia and Europe, including Japan, Italy, and France, they believe in a wider, more analytical approach. They've also been published in various national and international architecture and design magazines and online portals. They were the finalists for the World Architecture Festival in 2015, 2017, and now in 2018. They have been runners-up for the AR Design Awards, have recently won the NDTV Grohe Awards for the Best Bathroom Design, and have been facilitated by iGen as one of the top 50 young generation architects of India. Being at Studio Ardete and seeing the way they work has truly left me inspired. Alright, sir. So, before we actually start the interview, let us get started by knowing you better. So, where you graduated from, how you started this firm, and how has the journey been from there to here?
I graduated from IIT Roorkee in 2009, and the whole idea was like when I was graduating, I was impressed by some of the master architects, and I got to learn about them a lot. Then I could manage to get some internships at a few places. So I worked with Dominic Perrault in Paris, I worked with Wilmot, I worked with Mario Cucinella in Italy, and I worked with Shuhei. So I worked across in Europe and Japan. It was very different from what we could see what is happening in India. So we actually wanted to bring in the architectural values and qualities, what is happening there in a very professional way here. So that's the reason why we started.
Alright, so let's dive into our first segment, which is the PDF. So it's about the practice, the design, and the field. So let us start. So my first question to you would be, sir, let us try and get an essence of a design. So if you could, how would you describe your design philosophy in 3 words?
Life is more. So it's like an extension of what Mies one said, like less is more, and there have been other thought process that have evolved around it. So life is more is all about we saying that form and function for architecture isn't it's not enough. It's like we need to have something more to the design, to the spaces. So in life is more, we actually try to say that if a particular space actually emotionally bonds to its user at a very psychological level, so then it actually the physical aspects of space like materials, the space itself, and any kind of styles and forms and materials, they all vanish, and it's more like a bonding that happens at a psychological level. So if that happens, then it's like a celebration of a bond between a space and a human, which we try to achieve by what we call life is more.
Tell us about some of the challenges you faced when you started your firm that you couldn't have prepared for earlier. So something you could not foresee, some kind of challenges that came about when you started your firm.
Basically, like working with being like working, getting a education like in a college or something, wouldn't actually prepare you for the real life, the challenges of real life. So, and when we did it without actually working for somebody for a period of time, so it was a lot more difficult. So we had to actually overcome a lot of basics of profession, understand how actually it works, which is quite tough, and we had to learn it the harder way. And but it's good, like you get to, when you do it yourself, it's like it needs your extra. It's about all about how you can push yourself to what extent to understand it. Like once like clients were like more dependent on architecture, like in the previous ages. Now the advent of technology and social media and getting access to like internet would
So
actually
there are like more inputs about what they want, and so it's more user driven now, much more
yes,
than it
because
was.
so they actually try to jump to conclusion in the first place. You could actually get access to see what different things, and they would come up and say that okay, we want to do this. Wherein like the point that you would try to understand that like rather than you want to do this, that's fine, but why you want to do this. So you also need to counsel them as in to understand the requirement, because end of the day, even we say that okay, clients want something, it is at a particular moment. So most of the time it's not that he wants it, he thinks that he wants it. So we need to as an architect we need to understand, does he really want it, or he just carried away by something that he has seen for a short period of time that he actually wants it.
Okay, so talking about clients, it's so continuing with what you said. So there are a lot of times where your clients would demand certain, it's if not just requirements, certain style of architecture from you, and you have your own creative expression towards their particular project. So how do you balance their expectations versus your expression, and in your experience, which is the one that usually prevails?
See, client, yes, as a client, because he would come up with, okay, I want this particular style, I want to do it. But rather than doing it more on a subjective level, that thinking that he wants something and you want something, let us be more objective in approaching that what he wants and analyzing that why he wants. So, like style is the something that comes as a process, as a result, and it is not something like an initial starting impetus. So we start with the requirement, understanding and dissecting what he needs, and even if it is his particular personal space, or if it is a space like a restaurant or a bar that is built for somebody else, though he's a client, but the user or the person who needs to appreciate is someone else. So it is needed to break the subjectivity of like what he wants or what we want. It's more about evolving the objective part of it and trying to analyze that how it actually works for the entire project.
So, focusing on what all you said and how you uh, like to go about the design process, do you think in India today we need more designers, or do we need designers that are currently here? Do we need to strive to get better, to bridge better the client's expectation versus a sort of idealistic architecture that people look up to? And asking that question, actually sort of trying to get a hold of what you mean by design.
See, like in terms of like when we talk about design for a particular, I don't say that okay, designers need to have more techniques or something which is they need more inputs of doing it. It's all about, okay, when we talk about design evolution in our country, we are still in an initial stages wherein like the demand of design is actually coming up now. The problem earlier was like we weren't there was no demand for design, and even most of people, like they're still like they don't understand the concept of design. Like we are actually grown up in our childhood thinking that civil engineers make our buildings, and so that's how there was no introduction to design, and like most of the population still is like. So now because now more people were traveling, so now there's more demand of design which is rising. So that's the reason why we have more architectural students right now than the entire architects that the country has ever produced. So there are more students right now than all the qualified architects. So it's actually like growing up in a very great scale. But what I consider it as like we still need to make professionals who are more sensitive towards profession, because now we are more driven by the brands and the brand applications rather than focusing on the needs and something. So it's the industry that is like being driven by the big players like the brands and the property consultants, the builders, what they think of, rather than people who are responsible that what is right and what is wrong, like it happens in many other countries.
Yeah, I'm listening to kind of what you're saying is also, and a lot of people kind of set off in the field. They're not looking the projects. They do not. I think they use them as stepping stones because they're also building a brand. So they sort of, in using the projects as stepping stones, they kind of may tend to overlook the actual. They forget to kind of justify completely the project in that way. So I think this is similar to what I was listening to today. I think it was Will Smith talking on one of the shows, and he said, so if you want to build a wall, you don't try out and you don't think about, you don't say I'm building a wall, I'm building a wall, I'm building a wall. You start with a brick, and you say I'm going to lay it the best brick that has ever been laid, and let's start with that. And soon enough, as you go on laying the best bricks, you would have the best wall and a bigger wall. So I think like, so similar to what you were saying, it's like focusing on your projects and being more sensitive to the client, to the site, and working with individual projects rather than just seeing a bigger picture and a bigger brand, but getting a little bit on a micro scale as well. Okay, so that was the first segment, that was the PDF. Now we're going to move on to discussing one of the projects, which is the segment 2. We're going to discuss the Poolyard House that was designed by Studio Ardete. Before we actually begin discussing Poolyard House, let us first look at the house and how it was made. Located on a busy sectoral road of the city of Panchkula, the Poolyard House was designed for an elderly couple and their visiting family and friends. The design brief was to visualize a house exuding comfort, designed for relaxation and leisure. The concept was to place emphasis on the courtyard and the pool areas, with these acting as the focal point of the space. The house was conceptualized as a combination of the courtyard and the pool to give rise to a pool yard, or a central open space inside the house that would function as a leisure space by addition of a pool. The color, texture and material palettes of the Poolyard house have been kept subtle, with the use of wood and stone stealing focus. Colorful artwork contrast and complement against the toned down ambience of the interiors. Crafted carefully, each space within the courtyard house has been designed with patience and an amazing artistic flair. Oh, okay, sir. So, in Poolyard House, so let's start with the basics. Could you tell us a little bit about the site and the brief that you got for the project?
The site actually is like, it's an urban lot wherein like it's a standard lot of 500 square yards. It opens onto one of the main busy road, So because it's urban lot, it's like it's built like a row house where you share walls both you with your neighbors, and you just have. So these houses typically they don't have much happening around because you're facing a busy road which you don't want to, and you have the rear yard which is also the backyard of somebody else. So these lots actually they don't have much thing happening in sense of space that they could offer from outside. So what we tried was to create something that was more inward looking and something where we could offer them some interaction with nature, because otherwise most of these lots are like boxes closed and they have some fancy interiors, but we try to introduce nature in a small way. So but doing courtyards like in this climate is like also bit difficult because we got to cover the courtyards because of the extreme weather conditions. Unlike tropical climate, here we have extreme cold and extreme heat that needs to be taken care of. So it's a courtyard, but it's covered with glass, which would let in light. So the whole and it is like the client actually wanted something like a small recreational space, and he wanted to build a house which is more like a space everybody would want to be in, a space like because it's an old couple of around who were close to 60 years, so they live most part of their life, and now they actually want a house that is more like built for relaxation and recreation. So that was the whole point which we started with, to have a house which could be close to nature and which could have the sense of recreation built into its the basic nucleus of it.
Okay. Um. So when you started off with this idea of having a pool into the yard, so as you said, you want something that is inward looking. You wanted something, the central courtyard of the space, to kind of activate the whole space. So did the idea of a pool initially, was it in the plan, and or did you evolve it while doing it? So where did the pool come into the picture? And did the client sort of, the initial demands was a pool, or did you propose it saying it would be better?
Basically, it was initially it wasn't that they wanted a pool for exercise or something, but it was a pool more for recreation. It was more like they were keen to have a water body somewhere. So we tried to make a water body more like a plunge pool. So it doesn't. So the plunge pool is not a lap pool. So it's a very small space where you could immerse yourself into water. So that's more like a recreation, not more like a swimming pool where you can actually swim. So that was something that we were trying to bring in because the house was divided into three levels. The lower level was the ground level was for primary living. It's for the basic living, for having the main bedrooms and the main bedrooms for their daughter and the living spaces. And the first floor was done more for a recreational level, wherein it has a recreation space, a multi-utility space, which they call it as a party lounge or something, and and it also has couple of bedrooms for the guests, and so it's more like the recreational floor where it has terraces, pool, and the top level is the utilities and the domestic help who are actually housed, and the services and utilities being planned in it. So the middle level was something that has to do more with recreation. So that's when like we thought it would be interesting to have a lounge that was overlooking onto a plunge pool, and where we could open it up in an internal way. And the courtyard is also like a funnel wherein when it goes up it increases. So it starts with like a modest 10 feet by 15 feet small space, and it scales up on the top level like a 30 feet by 30 feet space, which is quite a lot for a lot which itself is like 45 by 90. So
All right. So now we've come to the final segment of the this show. that is all related to the field of education. So this is primarily for all the students out there, for all the prospective students out there. So we'll have a good conversation with sir about some small topics, and let us begin by actually a question that every architecture student is asked as well is, how did you end up studying architecture? Was it planned? Did you fall into it?
It was more, I would say, it's more like an accident because I was preparing for JE because at that time it was like I was preparing for JE and I was supposedly good at maths, physics, or chemistry. It was the like all my like the plus one and plus two or the junior college, what you call. So it was more preparing for an aspirant. I was an aspirant for IIT and I tried to clear it. So it so happened that I got it cleared on my first attempt, but I couldn't clear it both the then so-called screening and mains, and but I couldn't get a good enough rank to fetch me some engineering college, some engineering course for in IIT. So my mother actually wanted me to study in IIT, but I was not very particular like which particular stream was to go to. So then I could find something that is so-called architecture, which I wasn't introduced to yet. Like I didn't know what as an architect would do, and so then, but I still thought it would be a good try that so that my mother would be happy that I was studying in IIT and I could do something which was not an engineering which I didn't want to do.
So it worked out well at the end. So you studied in IIT. So I would like to ask, how much does a good institute matter in the kind of designer that you become in the field?
Institute does matter in a sense that not the name of the institute, but it's more like the kind of grooming you get from your seniors, you get from your peers, the kind of like the experience that you get in. So that actually helps you a lot in a sense that like being in IIT, was it like IIT being like architects from IIT is like again one of the rarest breed you could actually find because you could hardly from every year you could actually just get around 60 or 70 from combined from both the IITs because just the Roorkee and Kharagpur actually offer architecture, not the other IITs as far as I know, but now there's a new good collection of new IIT institutes which might offer it. So being in IIT was a bit more different, and doing architecture from there was different because we weren't like primarily what most colleges or people who aspire for architecture look like you need to be good at sketching or doing something which is more creative or painting or something. So the people and most of the people in my class weren't like they knew nothing of it because they were spending most time preparing doing their maths, physics or something. So most sometimes people even ask me like how good is to do architecture if he is not good at sketching or something, because end of the day like architecture is not art or something, it's more about expressing yourself. So if it is, it's okay that you're not good at sketching or something, but because you need to express your what you intend to do. So like having a good handwriting wouldn't warranty you as a good writer.
Yeah.
So for writing, to be a good writer, you doesn't need to have a good handwriting preferable. So the same thing works for architecture.
Alright. So it's a good thing you actually mentioned sort of sketching as well. So this is sort of leads on to my next question and the last question for today. Is a lot of students nowadays sort of focus a lot on softwares. So learning newer softwares because there are newer technologies coming in, and even when I explore different softwares, there are different aspects to designing with the help of scientific or mathematical data that I did not know before, and I find it quite fascinating to use that. So students are learning software at such a rate, even their teachers sometimes are not able to keep up with it because there's so many new ones coming in. My question is, do you primarily work with the help of softwares or do you work by hand? And what do you think is the role of technology in the field today?
See, the point is that technology is like an inherent part of the field. You can't separate technology from the field today. So, having said that and talking about good learning new tools is always good. It's always handy, and it's always gives you a new dimension on a new perspective. But most of the time, what I feel like we don't end up learning so many tools, but we because we don't understand and scientifically analyze how we could apply them or what we could make most of it. So like you see like good architects, like the great architects like Ando and all, like they were never good at like software. Even if you say that like Frank Gehry wasn't, he would you could really listen to a lot of his interviews wherein he says that he wasn't good at software and he was making the Bilbao this thing. So, but he had like he was working with people who were doing it, and he was trying to sit with them to evolve it. So the whole idea is like it's good to learn softwares, but don't just get carried away too much by knowing a lot of softwares. Like for example, like learning 50 new languages wouldn't warranty you to become a good speaker. So you can just be learning one language, but you can be good at it, rather than focusing to learn new languages, but you don't get you can't speak well. Like so, it's again it's like that dialogue what needs to happen. New tools, new technologies bring in new possibilities, but it's all comes down to your common sense and like how to use them. And you can just be good at just couple of tools, but you could do a lot of things rather than knowing 15 tools, but you couldn't actually explore the potential of it.
Yeah, so yeah, this was sort of similar to the conversation I was having with one of my friends once. Is we could learn a lot of softwares, but unless we kind of put it blatantly, unless you know how to design and design well, learning softwares does not do you any good, because that is just a tool to get to where you want to go. But you still have to know where you want to go.
Exactly.
You need a vision. It's just like you said, like Frank Gehry did not have that much experience with softwares, but he was only able to work with the people, and the people were only able to make his design come to life because he had a design initially. So starting with, so focusing a lot also on developing design capabilities, design sensitivities, aesthetics, and working out the basics before going forward, and having a strong foundation, so that even when you learn a new software, you like jump onto it, you know that this is where I want to go, so now I can use this software to reach faster. Not the software to show me the way, but the software to help me go faster on the road that I want to go. So that is all for today. It was really nice having you, sir, on this show, and you started off the episode 1, so thanks a lot for that. I would have the links for Studio Ardete down below in the description below. So please have a look at their website, have a look at the various projects. I'll put them, the projects down below. I'll put the description, the link for Puliar House as well. So you can have a look at their project. And that is it. Please like this channel, please subscribe to this channel. Also, I would leave a link to their Facebook page and Instagram handles, so you can go and visit them as well. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, and I wish you all the best for this new initiative, and you could scale it to new heights.
Thank you so much.